Welcome to Proclaiming Justice, a podcast from PJTN that focuses the light of truth on vital issues in today's headlines that impact every American. I'm your host, Laurie Cardoza Moore, founder and president of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, and I'm here to educate, motivate, and activate you to action. I want to arm you with the truth and the facts you'll need to fight and preserve our constitutional republic and uphold the Judeo-Christian values our nation was founded upon. Welcome to Proclaiming Justice, a PJTN podcast where we shine the light of biblical truth on vital issues from today's headlines that impact every American, Jew and Christian, people of faith, and people of conscience. I'm your host, Laurie Cardoza Moore. If you missed the last episode of this podcast, you will find it and our previous podcast lineup on our website at pjtn.org, as well as all the other platforms that you use to access your favorite podcasts. On this week's podcast, I have invited Robert Spencer, the Director of Jihad Watch and a Shillman Fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center. He is the author of 26 books, including the New York Times bestsellers, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam, and the Crusades, as well as many others. Spencer has led seminars on Islam and jihad for the FBI, the United States Central Command, United States Army Command, and General Staff College, the U.S. Army's Asymmetric Warfare Group, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, the Justice Department's Anti-Terrorism Advisory Council, and the U.S. intelligence community. He has discussed jihad, Islam, and terrorism at a workshop sponsored by the U.S. State Department and the German Foreign Ministry. He is also a senior fellow with the Center for Security Policy. I also want to remind you that it's important for you to listen and share this and all of our previous podcasts with your family and friends so that they can become more informed about this and other related issues that threaten our republic and the state of Israel. So please remember to like and share. Robert, welcome to PJTN's Proclaiming Justice podcast.
Thank you very much, Laurie. Great to be here. I've admired your work for years.
Well, the feeling is mutual. I've been following you for a long time, and of course, with great interest to the articles that you post, the information you put out there, the research that you've done. You are an incredible resource for those of us who are trying to bring truth out to our nation, really around the globe. So let's start out with a November 28th article that you posted on your website by Daniel Greenfield, where it was alleged that Ilhan Omar was recruited by a foreign government and passed sensitive information through intermediaries to Iran. Has there been any updates to this story, Robert? Because this is pretty shocking.
There has not been a single word about it since then. It's as if the allegations just dropped like a stone. Obviously, Ilhan Omar has quite a few very powerful and influential friends. And so if there is anything to it, she has a lot of people who will make sure that the full story doesn't come out. And so there's just no update to give you. Unfortunately, there isn't even a denial. They didn't even bother to give that. They just know that really the people who support her are not going to be swayed by this. Many of them will think it's a good thing. And so there's no accountability whatsoever.
Yeah, no, it's not surprising. Ilhan Omar was recently removed from the House Foreign Affairs Committee by Speaker McCarthy at the recommendation of Ohio Congressman Max Miller. What heroes. And of course, they did it because of the history of anti-Semitic statements that she's made. And also, it was an appointment that never should have been granted to her. How ironic when I think you were just as shocked as many of us in this fight when we found out that she was going to be appointed to that Foreign Affairs Committee, because she's the last person that should have been on that committee to have access to that information. Your thoughts?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. It's clear that the appointment that initially got her onto the Foreign Affairs Committee was motivated by a desire to secure the voting bloc that she represents, the growing voting bloc of Muslims in the United States, and to show once again that the Democrats are the party that opposes Islamophobia, which of course is really just a word that's designed to stigmatize people who are opposed to jihad violence. But the Democrat Party imperative is always first to last to show its commitment to diversity, multiculturalism, and all that. And consequently, the national security concerns
Hmm.
involved in this appointment were just of no importance to them whatsoever.
Yeah, it's very disturbing. You know, Robert, you have a long history of being involved in terrorism, and tell us a little bit about your background and where you came, how you came to this position. What was it that inspired you to get involved? Because you have become one of the most reliable resources to us when it comes to the issue of terrorism and 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 different groups that are in this country.
It really actually comes out of my family. My grandparents are from the last caliphate, the Ottoman Empire, and they were exiled from there for refusing to convert to Islam.
Mm.
I knew them, of course, when they were very old, and they would talk about how wonderful it was growing up over there. But then I asked them, well, then why did you leave? And they couldn't or would not tell me. So I wanted to find out, started to study these things. And particularly after the Iranian hostage crisis in 1979, this became a matter of interest to a lot of people. So I was consulting in the 90s with
Mhm.
some groups privately about these issues. And then after 9/11, was asked to write a book. I've written a lot of books about it now since then. But you know how one thing leads to another, so there it is.
Mhm. Yeah, no, ladies and gentlemen, as I read the pedigree for Robert Spencer, it is a tremendous honor to have him on this program. And as I mentioned, he has been one of the most reliable resources for me to use to try to expose the anti Semitism that has come out of the Middle East. Robert, my big transition moment was 9/11. I think a lot of people were impacted. We understood, we became Israelis after that horrific attack. And we understood that, you know, the battle that Israel has been fighting and waging against terrorism had now just come to our shores. And so 6 months after 9/11, our organization introduced a resolution to support the state of Israel against the rise of anti-Semitism in her country because of the attack that happened, and that really has what has expanded um, our mission and our efforts. Because a lot of this anti-Semitism is not only that we're seeing explode in our generation, is coming from the far left, the far right, radical Islam, but we don't talk about that. We don't talk about that part of the anti-Semitism that we see going on. So, you know, we've got a lot of work to do. And ladies and gentlemen, you know that this is one of the most important priority issues for PJTN in fighting anti-Semitism, and also combating the conspiracy theory peddlers. Speaking of one, Ilhan Omar. We also know that she has a history of peddling the conspiracy theories that come straight out of the fraudulent protocols of the learned elders of Zion. She's stated them before. Additionally, we also know that Ilhan Omar has a history of fundraising for Hamas terrorist front groups like CARE and ISNA, as she did in Florida, and she's done in Minnesota as well. So, Robert, talk a little bit about that, because she has a really interesting relationship with a lot of these groups. We know CARE was listed as an unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terrorist fundraising operation in the history of the United States of America. But what happened to them? I mean, it's like, you know, they get their hands slapped and nothing comes out of it, no investigation. And here Ilhan is out here raising money for groups like ISNA, for groups like CARE. Tell us a little bit about the research you've done and her connection to these terrorist front groups, like Qatar, because we don't want to leave Qatar out of this.
Well, you know, Lori, that's a very important point. that CARE was indeed named by the Justice Department as an unindicted co-conspirator in a Hamas terror funding case, and yet after that, nothing happened. The FBI even announced that they were not going to work with CARE anymore because of that, and then immediately went back on their word and kept on working with CARE more than they ever had before. And CARE is now very influential, deeply entrenched in
Mm-hmm.
Washington and all over the country, has regular contact with the Department of Homeland Security, with other government agencies and law enforcement agencies, both in Washington and at the state and local level. And so Ilhan Omar, in being a friend of this organization, is actually really just part of the leftist Democrat mainstream today. But that does not erase the fact that CARE is indeed essentially Hamas in the United States
Mm-hmm.
and working for the interests of Hamas and working to further the goals of the global jihad in general. And they love Ilhan Omar. You know that in 2021, she was named the American Muslim Public Servant of the Year at CARE's annual fundraising banquet. And of course, her speech was all about how Muslims are victimized
Oh, yeah.
and discriminated against in the United States, which is the currency of the left today. The more you can claim victimhood, the more status you have. And Ilhan Omar and CARE both know well how to play that game.
Yeah. Well, I find it really interesting that we allow um, these nefarious characters like Ilhan Omar in positions of authority. And we know that there are countries like the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, have listed CARE as a terrorist group tied to Hamas. So tell us a little bit about the other country that Ilhan Omar seems to be engaged in, meaning Qatar. And apparently, she was accused of being a Qatari asset. This was back last year, back in November. This is another article by Daniel Greenfield that was posted on your website. Talk about her relationship with Qatar.
Well, Qatar is, in the first place, the global center of the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood is dedicated, in its own words, according to a captured internal document, to eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within and
Hmm.
sabotaging its miserable house. Now, what better way to sabotage Western civilization from within but to get a representative, a high level American government official who is actually an asset who
Hmm.
is working for this hostile government.
Hmm.
But there were Qatari officials who said, and I quote, "If it wasn't for our cash, Ilhan Omar would be just another black Somali refugee in America collecting welfare and serving tables on weekends." Now that
Good
is
point.
to have we had a sane government right now that ought to have been investigated to
Mm-hmm.
see if she was set up by a foreign government in the pay of foreign governments. I mean, there's another thing too, Laurie, and that's the connection with Turkey.
Hmm.
The the Council on American Islamic Relations actually facilitated in 2016 a meeting between Ilhan Omar and Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
He has taken over from Saudi Arabia the role of building mosques that preach jihad and Islamic supremacism and the idea that Sharia, Islamic law, ultimately must supplant the Constitution. Those mosques used to be funded by Saudi Arabia all over the United States. Now they're funded by Turkey. And here's this representative of the
Mm-hmm.
United States government, a member of Congress, meeting with the president of Turkey. What did they talk about? What did they plan? Nobody is on the job in investigating her ties to Turkey, her ties to Qatar, and all the rest of it. And this is all because she's a uh, key member of the leftist coalition right now, and the left is in power, so she's untouchable.
That's frightening. It's disturbing that our national security is being sold down the river, and nobody is investigating what she is involved in. And this is, again, this is the petition. Ladies and gentlemen, you're hearing from Robert Spencer. Robert is an expert in these areas of terrorism and Islamic terrorism, organizations that are nefarious, that are working to try to undermine the future of the United States, our constitutional republic. This threatens, this activity, this type of activity by Ilhan Omar threatens our national security. It also threatens our greatest friend and ally in the Middle East, Israel, because Turkey, aligned with Iran and some of the other rogue nations that are over there, are a threat to what's happening in Israel. And we all know that the United States and Israel are uniquely, we have a unique relationship with each other. We always have since Israel's founding. And it's so critically important that not only is we're protecting our interests in the United States here in the West, we need to also make sure we are protecting Israel, our ally in the Middle East as well. So, Robert, what's going to come of all of this? I mean, are we ever going to be able to investigate the activity that she has been involved with? This is why we're putting together this petition, calling for this investigation on Ilhan Omar to determine if she gave any top secret information from her time being on that Foreign Affairs Committee, if she'd given any of it to any of these rogue groups.
Well, this is a very important question because it also should be noted that not only is Ilhan Omar involved with CARE, she is involved with all the major Muslim Brotherhood organizations in the United States. The Islamic Society of North America has quoted her, praised her, said that they stood with her while the controversy over her Foreign Affairs Committee position was going on. Same thing with the Muslim Public Affairs Council. She has appeared at, I believe, I'm not sure actually if she's appeared or just given a message to Muslim American Society events. So it's all of them: CARE, ISNA, Muslim American Society, the Islamic Relief Charity Group that's also tied to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. This is a representative who has multiple ties to organizations that have all been linked to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. And so what would it take for there to be an investigation? Well, there needs to be not only the wholesale repudiation of the majority party in the Senate and the party that holds the White House right now, but also a raising of awareness among the opposition, because there are all too many Republicans who think, well, it would be Islamophobic to get into all this. And so they don't want to investigate it either. And what we need are representatives at all levels of the US government who are aware of the nature and magnitude of the problem of Islamic Jihad and of the reality of the infiltration that has been carried out in Washington by Muslim Brotherhood groups. And that is, well, we're not close to that, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah, McCarthy, I was really impressed that Speaker McCarthy actually had the courage to remove her from the Foreign Affairs Committee. And of course, we're reaching out to Congressman Miller as well in his office, asking for this investigation, because I think Congressman Miller has the courage to address these issues. But yeah, I mean, what do you do when you have leadership who are afraid to speak out because they'll be accused of being an Islamophobe? I mean, you and I have been, we're on all of the lists accusing us of being Islamophobic and whatever they want to, extremists or whatever, domestic terrorists, because I go to school board meetings, whatever. But I mean, this is, these elected officials should be looking into these incidents like what Congressman Miller was willing to do and call for, because this does threaten our very existence as a country. And we need to know what Ilhan Omar has been up to during those years that she was on that committee. She's made it very clear through her comments how she feels about Israel and how she feels about the United States of America. She is not thankful for the opportunities that this country has given to her. We all know that. That's evident in some of the statements that she's made. But Robert, what do you think is, if any of the members of Congress or the Senate are tuned in listening to this podcast today, what would you say to them based on the research that you have, the investigation that you've done, these incredible articles that you've written? What would you say to these individuals?
I'd say that the evidence is clear that Ilhan Omar has loyalties, just as she accused supporters of Israel of having. She actually was engaging in the common leftist tactic of accusing her opponent of what she herself is guilty of. It's very clear that she has loyalties that are not the loyalties that a representative of the United States should have. She has the ties to Qatar. She has the ties to the Muslim Brotherhood organizations. She has the mysterious meeting with Erdogan. And she has all the relationships that she has built with CARE and with Muslim leaders who are tied to CARE and other groups like it in the United States. This is quite enough, or ought to be quite enough, to demonstrate that we are not talking about somebody who can be taken for granted as being loyal to the government of the United States. And these people have to grow a little bit of spine and try to understand the national security risks that this suggests and have the courage to grasp the nettle and start investigations that are nonpartisan and impartial and fair, but
Mm-hmm.
thorough and honest and genuine, to see if there is any fire where there's all this smoke, and
Mm-hmm.
not be deterred or cowed by the inevitable charges of racism and Islamophobia that would ensue.
Other than Congressman Miller, is there anyone else that you think would have the courage to step out either in the House or in the Senate?
Oh, I do think that some of the more vocal conservative voices in Congress,
Hmm.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Louis
Hmm.
Gohmert, some of the others would likely, if they were aware of this, be interested in pursuing it.
Hmm.
On the other hand, they would have to have the support of the leadership. And while
Hmm.
I agree with you that I'm glad to see that McCarthy removed Ilhan from the Foreign Affairs Committee, I doubt actually that he would really want to follow through with a full scale investigation. It would come
Hmm.
at tremendous political cost for him. He would
Hmm.
be accused of being vengeful, being partisan, of trying to stir up, trying to find a crime to justify the punitive action that he was taking. All these things, all kinds of charges would come to him that he probably doesn't want to have at this.
Yeah, well, unless we the people rise up, sign the petition, if we can get hundreds of thousands of signatures on this petition to launch this investigation, ladies and gentlemen, we need to protect the security of our nation and we need to let our elected officials hear from us as well. So remember, the petition is on the website. Just go to pjtn.org and go over to the banner that says Get Involved, scroll down to petition and sign it. It's right there, ladies and gentlemen. And then after you sign it, please remember to share it, to like it. Let's push it out. Let's get some signatures. We can't just let this go away. Just because she's been removed doesn't mean our job is done. She's still a sitting member of Congress. So, Robert, in closing, are there any final comments you would like to share or communicate with our audience?
Well, I'd like to emphasize, Lori, very briefly that there are all kinds of politicians who go to CARE events and events of ISNA and MAS and all the others because they don't realize what these groups are really all about, and they think it's just a photo op to show that they are supportive of the Muslim community and so on. And that gives legitimacy to CARE and Ilhan Omar working together gives legitimacy both to CARE and to Ilhan Omar's activities with it. And so we need to work hard to try to raise awareness of really what these groups are about and how toxic they really are, and call out politicians besides Ilhan when they buddy up to these groups and draw public attention to their naivete. These groups need to be identified and treated as what they really are, but nobody seems to want to pay the political price for doing that right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Robert, how can our audience find you? How can they get involved in what you're doing and learn more? Use you as a resource as I have used you over the years. What's the best way to find you?
Yeah, thank you. I'm at jihadwatch.org. That's JIHAD watch.org. We track jihad activity every day, updated many times daily. And the books are at Amazon, at Barnes & Noble, and wherever there are books still. If there are any bookstores out there, then they should have them as well. And I'm at Jihad Watch RS on Twitter.
Very good. Robert, God bless you. Keep up the great work. You are a great patriot, a great American, and we are so grateful for all the work that you do. God bless you.
You too, Laurie. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think you had an earful today. Please visit our website at pjtn.org and go to the Get Involved tab and click on the Sign the Petition link to ask Congressman Miller and Speaker McCarthy to launch an investigation into Omar's ties to these Muslim Brotherhood front groups. Then remember to share it with your family and friends. I hope you found this program informative. We will post this podcast on our website and all of our podcast platforms so that you can share with your family and friends. As PJTN Watchmen, we have a biblical mandate to stand against the ungodly rising Marxist threat that is destroying this nation and our Western nations, threatening our Judeo-Christian values and promoting anti-Semitism. We cannot remain silent. God warned the prophet Ezekiel about the responsibility of the watchman. As a watchman, you can sound the alarm and warn others by simply sharing this podcast with your family and friends. Please share and like this podcast to help sound the alarm in your community. Dietrich Bonhoeffer reminded us that silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. Don't forget to join us for next week's podcast as we continue this conversation about combating the rise of anti-Semitism, taking back local control of our communities, and making sure our country is secure and free. I want to also remind you that if you have not signed up to become a PJTN Watchman, you can help support this mission through our award-winning documentaries and Focus on Israel programs, as well as more programs like this for just $20 a month. So go to our website at pjtn.org to watch our programs and listen to our past podcasts. With your generous monthly donation, you can ensure that PJTN remains on the front lines and in the headlines, but we can't do it without your faithful prayers and financial support. I hope that you will prayerfully consider supporting our mission as we educate to activate Jews, Christians, and all people of conscience to stand on the front lines of this all-encompassing war. God bless you, and thank you for all you do on behalf of our Jewish brethren, the State of Israel, and these United States. Thank you again for joining me on this edition of Proclaiming Justice. Please share this podcast with your family and friends. For more information about how you can get involved, please visit our website at pjtn.org. As a PJTN Watchman, you can help us keep up the fight to preserve our freedom for our children and their children for such a time as this.